Eielson was an aviation pioneer and teacher. He was one of the best pilots of the 1920s. Within 15 years, he was the first successful flight by the Wright brothers. Eielson flew a plane over both the top and bottom of the world. He changed maps of the world and was the first to fly airman in Alaska. He was truly an educator and leader in a global sense. When he flew over the world, he changed people's minds. He changed their perspective on aviation. I marvel at Eielson's skill and courage, stated Hubert Wilkins, fellow explorer of the 1920s. Carl Eielson's legacy lives on through the evolution of world maps, specifically the Antarctic region, and the obsession of Alaskan Airlines today. Carl Eielson was born on July 20th, 1897, in Hatton, North Dakota. Graduated from common schools in Hatton in 1910. Carl Eielson enlisted in the Air Service of the U.S. Army on the 17th day of January, 1917. Enrolled in the U.S. Army Signal Corps so to be able to fly in World War I, but retired out of service on March 4, 1919. Graduating from the University of North Dakota in 1921, Carl Eielson entered Georgetown University to study law. While a student at Georgetown, he became acquainted with a representative from Congress from Fairbanks, Alaska, named Daniel Sutherland. Sutherland offered Carl Eielson an opportunity to teach at Fairbanks, Alaska in 1922. Sutherland wanted to break Alaska's dependence on shipping companies based out of the West Coast. He and Carl Eielson worked together on promoting air service in Alaska. It was at that time Carl Eielson's father, Ole Eielson, realized his son's need for a mentor would carry Carl farther out into the world. I believe that Ben has contributed to aviation in Antarctic and Arctic, and if he must be sacrificed, I am a proud but grieved father, Ole Eielson.
I remember every time he came, it was fun. We looked forward to it when he came. And considering I was born in 1921, I'm 93 years old, and that's the same year that he took off for Alaska to teach school. So actually, he sort of his home wasn't here anymore, but it was his home when he's in Hatton. And surprisingly, for transportation at the time, he came back quite a bit for the next 10 years. I remember him coming, quite often, surprisingly.
Carl Eielson was a visionary. He showed his leadership by recognizing the need for air service in Alaska. He realized the potential of finding new frontiers through aviation. The current mode of delivering everything, which included mail service, was by train or dog sled. After Carl Eielson settled into teaching in Alaska in 1922, he ordered a Curtiss airplane to be shipped to him at Fairbanks. Carl Eielson organized the Farthest North Aviation Club. His principal task was to transport medical aid and supplies to remote regions of Alaska. Carl Eielson demonstrated his leadership by promoting safety of flying. He became known as the father of aviation in Alaska. He was an inspiration, stated Gary Nemron, Hatton Eielson Museum curator. First experimental flights by the U.S. Post Office were carried out in February 1924 by Carl Eielson. Delivering the mail by dog sled took about 30 days to make one trip. He delivered 500 pounds of mail and marked an important epoch in airmail history. Carl Ben's contract was for 10 trips from Fairbanks to McGrath, a distance of 300 miles, and he was to receive $2 per mile. Each trip was completed in 5 to 6 hours. In 1925, Carl Eielson returned to Hatton, North Dakota, after his mail delivery contract was finished. While in North Dakota, he received a telegram from Visimir Stephenson in New York. Stephenson introduced Carl Eielson to Captain George Hubert Wilkins, an outstanding pilot and Australian explorer. Carl Eielson and Wilkins traveled in a Lockheed Vega to make their great flight over the top of the world. It took 3 tries.
Carl Eielson also did exploration in the Antarctic, and that was the same year that he did his top of the world flight. He and Wilkins did exploration in the Antarctic, and because of their exploration there, they discovered new islands. Consequently, maps had to be redrawn. He is the first to fly over the North Pole and in the Antarctic in the same year.
Eielson kept his nerve. I prayed 60, 70 miles an hour. We lifted, swung secondly, touched the ice again, then soared smoothly into the air, as quoted by Hubert Wilkins. Carl, Ben, and Wilkins flew from Port Barrow, Alaska to Spitzenberg, Germany in 1928. Carl, Ben, and Wilkins also flew over the Antarctic. In the summer of 1929, they made their first great flight in the Antarctic, a 1,200-mile trip. After their trip, the map of Antarctica was changed because they found 6 new islands during their flight. Carl Benn joined a company of pilots in the winter of 1929 on a flight to rescue stranded passengers and recover $1 million for the furs above a freighter ship caught in the ice off the Siberian coast. It was during this rescue attempt that Carl Benn, Eielson, and Earl Borland, his mechanic, lost their lives. Eielson's aircraft never reached the freighter Nunavut. 79 days later, a multinational air and ground effort discovered the wreckage of Eielson's plane on a small island off the Siberian coast. Both bodies were recovered on February 1930 and returned to the U.S. for burial. Alaska was later memorialized the aviator by naming a mountain peak near Mount McKinley after him. In 1948, the Air Force renamed its Mile 26 airfield, located 26 miles southeast of Fairbanks, after him. And in July 1985, Eielson was inducted to the National Aviation Hall of Fame for bringing aviation to the sparsely populated regions of the world and to better serve the needs for his fellow man. Carl Benn Eielson received numerous flying awards, such as the Distinguished Flying Cross awarded to any officer or enlisted member of the U.S. United Air Force who has distinguished himself in support of operations by heroism or extraordinary achievements while participating in aerial flight, and the Harmon Trophy awarded in 1928 presidential by Hoover, an award described by Clifford B. Harmon Trust as American Award for the most outstanding international achievements in the arts and science of aeronautics. Carl Benn Eielson is also the only person to ever receive the Theodore Roosevelt Rough Riders Award posthumously, bestowed upon the prominent North Dakotas. A middle school in Fargo, North Dakota, and an elementary school in Grand Forks, North Dakota, are named after him. The school nickname of Haddon High School was the Flyers, a tribute to a local hero.
With accomplishment comes recognition, and many things were given in honor of Carl Benn Eielson's accomplishments. Just to name a few, Carl Benn Eielson was inducted into the North Dakota Aviation Hall of Fame. Carl Benn Eielson was inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame in Dayton, Ohio. Carl Benn Eielson received the Congressional Medal of Honor, the Flying Cross Award. There are several schools named the Eielson School, the Carl Benn Eielson School. As such, there is an Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska named in his honor. We have the Hatton Cemetery has an archway that is the Hatton or the Carl Benn Eielson Memorial Arch. This arch was built by grade school children from throughout the state of North Dakota, sending their nickels and dimes to the city of Hatton to build and erect this monument in honor of Carl Benn Eielson, this great man in the field of aviation. Carl Benn Eielson received the Harmon Trophy. The Harmon Trophy is the highest award given by the United States government to anybody in the field of aviation. Carl Benn Eielson received the Rough Rider Award. The Rough Rider Award is the highest award given to a North Dakotan. Carl Benn Eielson was the first to receive it after his death. Carl Benn Eielson was a true humanitarian.
His accomplishments were truly astonishing. His story is impressive because it relates to his passion and dedication to aviation, stated by H.G. Wambaum, author of Benn Memorial. Carl Benn Eielson was one of the finest and best-known world heroes.